Hello, welcome back to the LadyK Podcast. I'm Katy McKinney, the founder and head of school for Lafayette Academy, a classical school, and I'm excited to talk to you about today, what we're going to talk about. And this is something that often goes unmeasured, but yet the consequences, the impact of this particular issue are huge. We're going to talk about soft skills, executive functioning skills, and emotional intelligence. At Lafayette, we believe that, of course, raising strong students, nurturing strong students is essential. And you do that, obviously, through great academics. But there's this nuanced thing that happens on the edges that can really polish off a student that just makes them amazing. And that is their emotional awareness and their being able to read the room. And we have some interesting data that I came upon that I thought you would just find very fascinating. Hopefully we can include the whole survey in the show notes that you could download. But this was a national survey conducted by High Point University. It was a research paper, I guess, or survey that they did where they conducted interviews with 500 C-suite executives. And the requirement was that the executives needed to have between 5,000 to 25,000 employees. So a good, robust, populace that they surveyed, and that we got some really interesting data that can help us as we think about what's the best way to educate our students. So they asked a slew of questions. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to just highlight a few and dive a little bit deeper, but fascinating. So the first question, which of these reasons would make you most hesitant about hiring a new college graduate? And the answers were three things. Number one, it would make me hesitant as a C-suite executive to hire someone who had a lack of emotional intelligence and people skills. What percentage? 68%. Almost 70% of C-suite executives need to have employees who have people skills. The next one down, 21% said that if they lacked experience in a corporate setting, that would make them think twice. And only 11% said that if the candidate lacked technical skills, that would make them think twice. So let that sink in. Only 11% were concerned about tech skills because that can be taught on the job. Interesting. So it just makes me think of all of our schools who say, oh, computers, tech, they need to have all these skills, blah, blah, blah. They get it. They get it at home. We all know our kids are way above us when it comes to tech skills. They've got that. What they don't have, and what's much harder to teach, is the essential one. It's the emotional intelligence. So obviously the kids are going to need facts. They're going to need, knowledge, content knowledge. That's all important. But the people skills, the self-awareness, the leadership maturity, that is huge. And that can make or break an opportunity with an employer. Here's another stat. Are you likely to say this phrase to a recent college graduate that you hire? Quote, I need you to figure out this problem. 71% of the executives said, yes, I will probably ask that of my new hiree. Only 29% said no. So again, what are employers looking for? They basically want problem solvers. They want people who can think independently, who can organize information, and then push through uncertainty. You're going to have people, oh, that's not going to work. Oh, I don't like that idea. Oh, but if the candidate is confident that they've gathered all the information they need and they know that they've got a good pathway forward, they're going to need to have the confidence to move that thing forward, maybe even gather support as they go. All of that is working with people. So here's another telling question. Do you think that taking candidates to a restaurant reveals important aspects of their personality that could provide you a sense of how they might handle themselves on the job? 66% of the executives said yes. That's going to be a key component. 34% said, no, it's not that important. So 2/3 of these executives say something or would use something like etiquette, social awareness as a hiring lens, whether they say yes or no to that candidate. I have to say, I would put myself in that category as well. That is something that I'm always looking at, is how they might represent themselves. Okay, and then finally, this question. When you're interviewing a recent college graduate, do you think about how comfortable you would be with that candidate representing your company in front of clients? 90% said yes. Maybe that's a no-brainer, but it's huge. If they are not representing themselves well, that candidate may never get through that interviewing process. how you show up, right, for the interview, how you follow up after the interview, how you're dressed, how you articulate your ideas, all of that. So I have to say, I feel the same way. I want to know when I'm hiring someone. In fact, I just hired 2 people recently, but one in the last 30 days. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, would they represent the school well? Can they speak well? Can they articulate ideas well? Can they hold a conversation? Can they listen well? How do they manage themselves at the table? All of that. Those are high stakes social skills, and they matter. It's not something you can even put on your resume. It's something you have to just evaluate when you're sitting in front of them. Okay, so how do we form emotional intelligence at Lafayette? I want to share with you a story that was really impactful to me. I was working with a 4th grader. She was having some social challenges, a minor conflict with a classmate. This happens obviously from kindergarten all the way through. But we sat down and we talked about, how we treat our friends, how we treat, this particular scenario. And I shared with her that obviously it's important to be kind to everyone. But I introduced the idea that you don't have to be best friends with everyone. And as we talked, I think in her head, she hadn't really contemplated that she has a choice as to how she allocates her time. As adults, we all obviously know we have limited amount of time. We've got to spend time with our families and our spouses and our jobs and then family beyond and all of that. And all of that you've got to think about how you can best allocate that, right? And you need to evaluate your prerequisites, if you will, as to, who's going to get the most time. Well, time is a resource. And she started to understand that she has the ability to choose how she's going to invest her time. And that her friends, she wants people around her who she can trust and people who are kind and respectful and fair. And that's what helps build friendships and relationships. So as we did this, you could see the light bulbs going on, and she was like, okay, I get it. I will be nice. I can be friendly to everyone, but I don't have to be best friends. I don't have to invest the same amount of time for every single person in the classroom. It was a really beautiful, mature conversation. And at the end of that, I told her, I said, you know what I'm observing? I said, you have very high emotional intelligence for a 9-year-old. I said, do you know what emotional intelligence, do you know what that is? And she said, no, I've never heard of that word. And I said, it's your ability to read the room, your ability to understand tone and body language. And that's a big deal. And you can tell she just lit up because she never had been told that perhaps, but she recognized that she could do that. And I said, that's a big asset. It's very difficult to teach that to someone, but if they already have it, it's wonderful. And so since that conversation, what I've seen happen to her is that she is becoming more of a leader in her classroom. She is respected. She is trustworthy. Her peers want to follow her because they trust her. And she's continuing to rise both academically, but also in these very soft skills that are, again, very nuanced and not very easily measurable. But she's just really rising, and it's beautiful to watch. It's inspiring to watch a 9-year-old do these sort of things. It's obviously not something a textbook can teach, but it's incredibly important, and it will make for great leaders, which our country is desperate for. Now, let's return back to one of the data points. 66% of executives said that taking a candidate to a restaurant can reveal key personality traits. So like I said, I put myself in that 66%. When I'm interviewing someone, I'm definitely paying attention to, can they hold a conversation? Are they able to express themselves clearly? Are they able to say their point and stop talking? Don't say it 3 and 4 times. Of course, if we go out to a restaurant, how do they eat? How do they conduct themselves? All of those things matter extremely to us, not only just to me personally and to me with the organization that we're building, but to our students. If we're going to be teaching this to our students, obviously we have to demonstrate it ourselves first. So let's talk about how we do that, how we cultivate that in our students at Lafayette. So we have this thing called our formal winter dance and our etiquette training. And the way I think about it is it's like a fine dining learning lab is what it is. And we are creating intentional experiences to teach our students how to carry themselves with confidence and poise and clarity. What we do is we start in December and January teaching etiquette. We insert a class, a lesson during lunchtime. We do it 3 or 4 times over the course of about 4 to 6 weeks. And we're teaching them how to set a table. If there are numerous forks on a table, which fork do you use first? How do you, with non-verbal communication, how do you signal that you are done eating? When you put your fork, knife, and spoon in rows I say, line them up as soldiers, that tells your waiter or waitress that you are done. What do you do with your napkin? How do you have a conversation? All of this. So we go through this with them over a period of a number of weeks. And then simultaneously in PE, we're teaching them between 4 and 8 ballroom dances. And so we really work on mastering 4. Sometimes we'll add 1 or 2 more, but the program, our PE program, has a total of 8 ballroom dances. On this night, it will be in February this year, late February, we will have a formal catered dinner with hors d'oeuvres, mind you. So as the students are coming in, they go through a reception line. We teach them how to go through a reception line. You're meeting everyone. You have to remember names. You have to maybe turn behind you and say, oh, so-and-so, I'm Katy McKinney, and here is, my husband, Mr. McKinney. And you introduce, you have very small, quick conversations. Then you move into the setting where now you're having hors d'oeuvres. You're standing, you're talking, you're mingling. How do you do that, in a very respectful and tasteful way? Then they sit down, they have their formal dinner. They're in suits. Of course, the gentlemen are in suits. The ladies are in beautiful gowns. That alone is just new and different. We then have, this is hosted by a very successful CEO, and he then gets up and talks about etiquette within his own company. And he actually has shared with our students that, the people who come to him that already have this training, they advance a lot more quickly. There's other times where you've got employees who haven't had this training. And what has he done? He's taken his own, dollars maybe from the company, but he has invested in his people to teach them and train them because he wants them to represent his company well. So he wants them to have this. We're just trying to get ahead of the curve. So all of this is being taught, and it culminates in this beautiful, and I would say almost magical night where these kids are showing up and being amazing, not only in how they look and present themselves, but in the way they conduct themselves. We had one student who one year was very socially awkward, and it was difficult in class for him to talk, just articulate his ideas. He was very, very bright, but just the smoothness and the confidence, all of that was, a work in progress. Well, we ended up having him sit next to one of our hosts, and all of us were incredibly surprised. He was radiant that night. He carried on a beautiful conversation. She was very well versed at making people feel comfortable, but the two of them had this amazing evening. It was a beautiful moment for him, for all of us to kind of witness that. These, obviously, the academics are very, very important, but these life skills, these leadership skills, they're often things that adults are just expected to know in professional life, but if you're not explicitly taught, it's difficult to learn them. And so sometimes we figure it out by accident. We don't want our kids to figure it out by accident. We want to teach it. We want to model it. We want to give them sort of a protected space to kind of trial and error these new things that they're learning. And this night is a beautiful culmination, and they usually show up amazingly. It's really fun. So let's go back to another interesting statistic. It said, would you say the phrase, "I need you to figure out this problem," to a recent college graduate? 71% of executives said, yes, I will be doing that. And that's a high bar. 70% of the employers out there are going to be testing our graduates as they come out. I will say, I said this within the first week to my new hire. We had a problem that I've been trying to figure out for a couple of years. It needs some dedicated, and it's not a huge process problem per se, but it's one that if we could figure it out, it would be phenomenal. So I said, I need you to figure out this problem. And I gave her the problem before, and she's like, she looked excited as to how to tackle that. And I said, bring me back 2 or 3 suggestions, and then let's figure out the best one, and then we'll go forward. So it also empowers the employee to have ownership of things like that. So we believe that our students can start rising to that now. One of the ways we do that is we don't eliminate problems for them. They're going to hit some roadblocks. In fact, we just had an awesome talk, kind of going off interrupting myself here, but we had an awesome talk this last Monday. We had Virtue Talks. Ellen Kusamana came in and she shared with us how life is going to throw roadblocks in your way. And she gave a great example of when she was in college and she was told, nope, you can't take that specific class. It was an Italian course that she wanted to take, and she got no numerous times, and she just wouldn't take no for an answer. She was polite, and she was respectful, but she eventually got the class she needed, and she took off and completely changed that professor's perspective of her. And she had numerous examples where she knew she had to get something accomplished, and she just wasn't going to take no for an answer. So all that to say, our kids are going to hit roadblocks. They're going to hit problems and challenges. And in a way, those trials are opportunities to show proof that we do care about our children, because we want them to kind of work through that struggle to further increase their own confidence and their own problem-solving skills. And there's going to be times where we have to guide them, right? We're going to have to put up some guardrails to help them. But in the end, the goal is that we want them to be self-governed and to be able to navigate that difficult course on their own. And poor decisions are going to come about. We're going to have to navigate again with them. But we make great progress. I think of just a quick scenario wherein some kids, again, had a social conflict. And a lot of these kids today, they're just texting each other. They don't have conversations, especially not face-to-face. And so when we have a reconciliation conversation, we often will sit in my office around a big coffee table and dining table, whatever. And we model for them the way of talking to each other, be it respectful, taking turns, not interrupting each other, kind of keeping the emotions at bay and really dealing with just the facts. Oftentimes there's an apology and forgiveness. And what I notice is that these kids really rise to a very high level, not because we're demanding it, but because they want that in themselves. They want that sense of relationship to be a mature one. It's really beautiful. And so they bounce back with grace, and it's very inspiring. Why does all this matter? The way I think of it is we're not preparing our students to go just for college, right? Or to get a good job. We're preparing them to show up in life. These soft skills are going to have impacts in their relationships with their family, with their sibling, with their future spouse if they choose to get married, their future children. It impacts every aspect of their life. And we want them to have their own ethos of responsibility, of thoughtfulness, just of that sense of genuine confidence that is not ego driven, but is driven with love for yourself and for your fellow man. And gratefully, like I started off this talk, it is difficult to measure these things. We can't sit down with a test and per se, test them. We just have to get it through real world scenarios. And I'm happy to say that we hear from parents, from grandparents, from opposing teams that our kids are showing up. They are being respectful. They can hold conversations. And I heard from one parent that they were traveling and they were on a bus, and the student was talking with a complete stranger as they were riding to the airport, and they had this full, fabulous conversation. And afterwards, the stranger was like, "Wow, that was really uplifting." We've had others where we, with our athletic team, our shooting team, we go and we compete, obviously, with different teams and schools, and we often will get from competitive coaches coming up and saying, "Your students, your athletes are incredibly respectful. They are thankful. They're grateful in the way they show up." And we've kind of gotten the reputation now that the Lafayette kids, they really show up and they show up well. That's of course gratifying, but what's even better is that these kids are making it their own. They're doing it when adults are not around, and it's awesome. We want to teach our kids how to learn to be of value, to understand that they can contribute and that they can go be a blessing in the world, and that alone will matter way more than any test score. So I appreciate you listening. If you like this episode, we would love it if you would share it with a friend or even maybe another parent. And so until next time, enjoy loving what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful. Thanks.